Your point, your platform. The Frank Mitchell phone-in for you.
Now, how Irish are you feeling today? Have you got an Irish passport, by the way? If you're someone who holds a British one, do you make the effort to get both so as, you know, sometimes you might feel safer on an Irish passport, all of that? More and more people apparently are applying for Irish passports because they have a slight worry that Britain will leave the European Union. And as a result of the sort of Brexit that everyone's talking about, well, for example, you could be slowed up in the airport when it says EU nationals and non-EU passport holders. It always seems to be slower when you're non-EU, or is that just my imagination? According to the figures by the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs for 2015, 507 British citizens entitled to apply for an Irish passport through the granny rule, so to speak, applied to the Irish authorities for a passport. In 2014, 379 people had applied under the same reasoning. And here in Northern Ireland, we're entitled to both. Let me speak to George Sanderson, who has a very obvious interest in this. Good morning, George.
Good morning. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very, very well. Sorry about the confusion. George, you're involved with a publishing company that draws up, I suppose, the quiz for people who want to become Brits. The Irish, I don't think, have such a system. You don't have to answer the questions to get Irish citizenship. But just remind us of why you do if you're applying for a British one.
So it's a legal requirement. Basically, anyone who wants to get permanent residence has to apply using the Life in the UK test, and if they don't come from an English-speaking country, they also have to take an English language test. And these are compulsory requirements, basically.
Yeah, I see some of the questions that Red Squirrel publish are indeed linked to Ireland as well. And one of those questions is, which of the following is a traditional food of Northern Ireland? And some of the questions are the pasty, the pancake, the fish cake, or the Ulster fry. Another of the questions, who defeated James II at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690? Was it William III? Was it William the Conqueror? Elizabeth I? Winston Churchill? Who was the most famous missionary and patron saint of Ireland? St. Patrick, St. George, St. Andrew, St. David. Now, some of those, there's another one, by 1200, the English rule an area of Ireland around Dublin known as the pate, the pict, the pale, or the plain. All of those, for anyone who probably went to school and listened to any great extent, would be answerable. However, I could understand people getting some of those wrong.
Yeah, there's a big regional variation in the knowledge, to be honest. I mean, I sent you a selection of questions that relate to Northern Ireland and Ireland because it's relevant to you guys. But, I mean, they're not obvious and immediate to me. We don't necessarily get taught about the Pale or, you know, say the Good Friday Agreement or England's various dubious adventures in Ireland. You know, it's not always part of our education, so it's not immediately obvious to people over here.
I'm, you know, for example, let me ask you this question, and you probably set it so you'll know the answer, but how many people do you think would have known the answer to this here before, say, this year started? Because we're talking about this all the time now. A delay in introducing Home Rule to Ireland resulted in the Easter Uprising, which took place in which city? Now, would people automatically say Dublin, or would they begin to think about the other options, which are Belfast, Cork and London? Is this about trying to stymie those who are applying, to ensure that some people who are deserving falter?
I think that's a tough question. I mean, the purpose of the test is a difficult thing because it's meant to be about confirming your British identity and knowing that, you know, someone has some knowledge of life and language in the UK. That's the principle it's based on. But in reality, when you start writing questions, you immediately commit to one line or the other. You say that this is more important than something else. In terms of just taking it to prepare for a test, you can learn the facts, sit down, study them, prepare, and off you go. But does that give you a full understanding of the United Kingdom, of, you know, Irish history, Scottish history, Welsh history, so on and so forth? That's a tougher thing.
Does it surprise you that more and more people want to have the Irish passport in case Brexit does come to pass?
Not in the slightest. There was a quote from a guy who's, I think, Glenn O'Hara, who's a professor at Oxford Brookes, and he said, "I regard myself as a European, and I don't see why anyone else has the right to drag me out of that." Now, aside from the fact that legally they do, if we vote to leave in the referendum, I mean, it tells you what people think. I consider myself a European as well, and I can't apply for an Irish passport, but I would be looking at how I can keep that identity if the vote to leave happens.
It's interesting. I'm entitled to an Irish passport. I've never applied for it, and I'm now in my early 50s. But I must get round to it, because one of the things I've noticed with my daughter, who holds both passports, she decides which one to take with her at any particular time. She's based across in England, and obviously when she's dealing with her employer and whatever, and she needs to represent them or prove her identity, she has her British passport. But when she's flying, and she sometimes does to the Middle East, she is, the British passport doesn't get next or near the Middle East, because she feels safer with an Irish passport.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that, I suppose. It's a complicated thing to hold multiple identities in the world, I suppose. For me, that's one of the attractions of the European thing, though, because as part of the Union, then, there's this collective consciousness we share, as well as our individual identity as Brits or Irish people or Welsh and so on.
Are we any safer with an Irish one, considering international terrorism?
That's again and stuff like that. I mean, as a pragmatist, I do think that if you are going to be encountering terrorism, whatever passport you've got in your pocket won't affect what happens to you, will it? You're in the right place at the right time, or you're not.
Yeah, and I suppose there's living proof of that in the past as well. And we could give examples. We could indeed give examples of it. Brian Keenan probably is an example. He had an Irish passport all those years ago. Yet and all, he was taken hostage. Just before you go, George, I'm going to try you with 4 Northern Ireland questions to see how you would do at Red Squirrel Publishing. Okay.
Oh dear. Okay, go on.
Name the international singing star born at Hindford Street in Belfast.
Daniel O'Donnell.
Okay, number 2. What is the tallest building in Northern Ireland?
I genuinely haven't got a clue.
Okay. St. Patrick, we're celebrating him today. What sort of animals No, I'll not ask you the question what sort of animals. I'll ask you the mountain that he looked after the sheep and the pigs on.
Again, I don't know. My English education is failing me here.
And who is the Northern Ireland football manager taking us to the Euros?
Oh, do you know what? I don't know the English football manager, so I'm never going to get that one.
George, at least you're honest with me. You didn't get any right. Van Morrison was the singer.
Oh, of course it was.
The very idea that Daniel O'Donnell came from East Belfast will put a smile on many Irish faces this morning. George, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The very entertaining George Sanderson there from Red Squirrel Publishing. They're the people who test you to see if you're worthy of a British passport.